impact of digitization, the internet is kind of obvious, reduces distance, brings people from far away very close to each other, and also brings providers, sellers, close to the buyers. You can buy a book from Amazon.com, which is in Washington State, many thousands of miles away from here, and you can get it delivered in a few days instead of getting it from your local bookstore. So it reduces distance. It intensifies competition. Now, many people say, well, that's great. That's great if you have high productivity. It's terrible if you have low productivity. So the fact that the internet creates new possibilities for business is not necessarily good. You have to do, you as a country, have to do many more things to make sure that you are of the high productivity and therefore you are able to take advantage of the internet accessibility. Now, there have been studies of the impact of the internet and telecom infrastructure on international trade, on growth, and they both, all the studies show a very strong impact of the investment in infrastructure on trade and growth. Let me talk a bit more about one study, a recent study by Vu, who looked at all the countries of the world and looked at investment between 1999 and 2005 in information and communications technology, and found a strong correlation between such investment and the growth rate. If you look at that study carefully, Greece had high growth despite, at the time, low investment in ICT during that period, and of course it would have done much better if there was high investment in ICT. Now, when you talk about the network, one of the issues that was been brought up by previous speakers as well is the issue of net neutrality. What is net neutrality? Net neutrality means you treat the packets of information on the internet the same way, irrespective of what they produce and what they pertain to. So you use an email packet, you treat it the same way as you treat a video packet and so on. Now, having net neutrality, and net neutrality is the status quo in the fixed world of the internet since 1993, guarantees a level playing field of competition on the internet, including the dissemination of news. It might look weird to talk about dissemination of news, but in very early times, when the only network that existed was the telegraph, there was a monopoly agreement between Associated Press in the United States and the only provider of telegraph service at the time, Western Union. And because of that monopoly agreement, Associated Press essentially became a monopolist of news for a decade. So it's important to have net neutrality besides all the other business reasons, also for the dissemination of news. We can also show that it's a significant contributor to innovation and growth. On the other side, there are some telephone companies, in particular in the United States, AT&T and Verizon, and practically all the cable TV companies that want to abolish it. So I believe that for the benefit of growth and equality, it should not be abolished, and it should be extended to cellular providers, because presently cellular providers provide specialized versions of internet access which do not conform to full net neutrality. Now, the recently elected president has made net neutrality part of his platform, part of his campaign pledges, and has implemented it in a small part, in a small part of the stimulus package. It's a huge stimulus package in the United States, about $1 trillion. A small part of it is on infrastructure in telecom and requires net neutrality. Now, generally, let me talk about the United States, but I'll talk about Greece next. I mean, in the United States, the full benefits of the cost reductions that I mentioned before of telecommunications production and competition have not been achieved by the consumers. That is, prices have not fallen as much as cost. And in a very ironic way, the regulatory structure in the United States, which was supposed to help the consumers to get to the lowest prices, in fact has helped not to reach low prices and to keep the prices in relatively high levels. And on the internet, the US is performing pretty badly. It's number 15th in the internet penetration in December 2008, which, you know, by American standards is disastrous. I mean, you know, the internet was created in the United States. For the US to be number 15 right now is a disaster. And everybody knows it, and everybody tries to find a way around it. Greece started on the internet broadband late because of the abuse of the monopoly power of OTE, and I'm not going to get into the details of that, but you know it. People have alluded to ISDN and so on. ISDN pushing versus the newer technology of DSL has considerably improved its position in the last 4 years, but it's still pretty low in the rank of OECD. It's 26th, has a long way to go, and it's behind comparable EU countries. Comparable EU countries, in my opinion, are Portugal and Ireland. And of course, if you're going to compare it to Denmark and Netherlands, small countries of the European Union, it's way behind. Let me show you the picture. So this is an OECD graph. I just put the arrows in. One arrow for the United States, number 15. One arrow for Greece in number 2026. Okay, so the bottom line. What can be done and should be done for internet growth in Greece? First, it needs strengthening of the regulator. Regulators everywhere, including the United States, are under pressure from governments, Congress, and so on. So it's important for the regulator to be strong. It's important for the regulator to push for low prices for internet access. Low prices for internet access is the most important driver of high penetration. So it's important for this to happen. It's important also to promote infrastructure entry. Greece doesn't have much infrastructure entry, so it's important to be able to get there, and the network that is being discussed, the new fiber optic network, might be a way to promote the infrastructure entry. It's important to adhere to the requirements of unbundling so that there is the separation between infrastructure and service that would allow more service competition even if we don't get sufficient infrastructure competition. Now, what else can we do? We can promote complementary products. For example, personal computers. State gives away here computers to university students, and I heard that it's going to give more computers to high school students. These are, of course, very, very useful things because you need a computer to get into the internet. Even a netbook one, as Dr. De Greponte said earlier, you still need some type of device to get in. I think it's also important to promote content in Greece, content in Greek. That's, to some people, an important determinant. We can always say, well, everybody in the book speaks English. I'm not so sure if that's true for everybody in the population here. It's important to be able to promote content in Greek. And I think in general, it would be useful to facilitate internet access even in ways that are non-traditional, like the providing of free Wi-Fi access in village squares or in town squares or even in Syntagma Square, as it has been done. And these have been pretty successful wherever it has been done. They're essentially low-cost ventures. It costs a few $100,000 to provide internet service, Wi-Fi service in Syntagma, so I don't see why it would be only limited to that. So these are the various things that I think might be done, and I'll be happy to answer your questions later. Thank you very much.